Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Guido and Emma, for involving me in this project. And I would like to thank also Gabriella Iacomella, that was the person that started working on the media section. And thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks, Nicola, for inviting us tonight. And the publisher, of course. Where is the publisher? For the great job it's done. So, the media section, as you can imagine, these topics, or the representation of migration and migrants in Italy, in Italian media is a very current issue and I would say topic. We constantly have not just research, but also and debates, but also newspapers article, TV programs on migration and the representation of migrants in the Italian media. I'm personally involved in another project in Italy, and I'm trying to coordinate a national gathering soon, I hope, of NGOs, associations and scholars about this topic. So, I mean, this is a current topic. The representation of migrants, as you can see from not just from reading the book, but also from reading other books and other articles about this topic, about this issue, is still, an important and relevant matter. Also because the representation is still unbalanced, if I may say that. We tried in the media section to give the readership a sort of balance, at least a balanced overview on the scholarly debates on this. So how could we approach this topic? How could we sort of analyze the data we have about the representation of migrants and migration in Italy, and not just in Italy, but mainly in Italy? Could we give the readership a sort of updated kinds of overview, a picture, not just from the point of view of data, which can be updated constantly, but also from the point of view of methodology we apply to this data. And I'm very happy because I think we succeeded in giving the readership, a sort of updated picture, as I said, not just of data, but also of methodology, of methods to approach this data. First of all, we have two studies by Marco Binotto and Marco Bruno. They work at La Sapienza in Rome. They work with the Carta di Roma and other NGOs in Italy, and they constantly assess and monitor the representation of migrants by the media, by Italian media, particularly by newspapers, by national newspapers. And I have to say that their reports, they write annual reports about this. Their reports are probably one of the most relevant contributions to this kind of debates, and they are very accessible also, not just to us, to scholars, but also to a general public. And their contributions to this book are very important, not just because they, as I said, they refer to the reports and the data they can gather and collect by doing their own research and monitoring, but also because from the methodological point of view, they try to give us new elements, new ways of approaching the problem. It's not just, they talk about, of course, data, so gathering the data, and one of the major concerns is how much data should we gather in order to have a sort of representative and coherent corpus to analyze. So my first concern is this one, and it's also a sort of open question to you and to my colleagues. So what could we do in order to have the quantity of data that we need in order to analyze this in a sort of coherent and consistent way? So that's the first question. And again, they try to give us some answers. So we need to be consistent. We need to be to have a lot of data. And also we need to analyze them through softwares, and in order to work not just on isolated items, isolated expressions, isolated words, keywords, even if keywords is a loaded term in discourse analysis, but keywords. No, we should also look at clusters of words. Also, we should also look at co-locates or co-collocations of words. We should also look at frameworks and context. And this is something that I've done or tried to do in the chapters. And I'm very happy that these results are still sort of valuable, even if the data need to be updated constantly. Then we try to understand what happens at a linguistic level, and particularly in my chapter I try to look at, as I said, not just at isolated items, but also discourse in general, so rhetorical strategies, coherence, textual coherence, and also, again, to corpus linguistics, so how to analyze big chunks of data in order to have something reliable when we talk about migrations, because otherwise all this analysis becomes impressionistic, and we want to avoid that now. I mean, we have the tools, the data, the corpora, in order to have something, a better picture, a more detailed picture about these issues. And so we should use those data and this methodology. And then we have important chapters by Andrea Pogliano, an important chapter by Andrea Pogliano looking at pictures, so the visual representation of migrants. So again, when we talk about discourse or text, we are not just talking about verbal text or words. We also talk about, from a semiotic point of view, in general, we talk about images, visual representation, TV programs, photography, and all this kind of material. So, and Andrea Pogliano again applied new methodologies to the data that he could collect about this. So, analyzing pictures and photographs of migrants reproduced in newspapers, magazines, and other media, in order to see if there's a framework that is, has been constructed by the media, and if this framework is persistent or it changes, according to the current debate. So again, this is another important chapter. And then we move to Gabriela Iacomella's chapter. She's a journalist, and her contribution again is very important. And again, this is another open question to you and to my colleagues. The problem is not just to represent migration and migrants in a correct way or in a neutral way, but it's also to give these people a voice in the media. In newspapers, in TVs, in radio programs. And this is another major concern we have in Italy, because even if NGOs like Carta di Roma, COSPE, and other NGOs are monitoring, the representation of migrants by the media, are just, warning editors, journalists, newspapers, directors to be as more neutral as possible when they talk about these issues. Well, even if we have this kind of activity, we don't have the migrants' voice in this media. So we have just one single way of representing migration and migrants in the Italian media. So what is the voice we should grant to these people, to the newcomers to Italy? And so we got a problem, agency. As we use this word, and again, another key term in discourse analysis, but agencies. Who's doing what? Who's speaking for whom in the media? So again, we have a chapter about this, and this is another, I think, current and important and relevant topic to talk about when we talk about representation of migrations. So it's not just us representing someone else, but it's also, sort of incorporating other people's voices in the discourse, and to create, a better narrative what is happening. And then we have a chapter by Eugénie Saïta, a French researcher, that talk about multiculti or mixed media. So Yalla Italia, a medium created and organized and supported by also migrants, by the newcomers, the new Italians. So it's not just made by Italian people, but by a sort of mixed kinds of group, collective. And again, this is another issue, and this is another open question to you and to myself. How could we represent migration, in a sort of neutral or in a sort of, positive way, if we don't have not just the voice of other people? So we interview people, we interview the migrants, what do you think about, blah, blah, blah. But if we don't have journalists or editors that come from those backgrounds, that comes from those cultures. And it's very difficult to have media, that can be supported and financially sustained by, in Italy, and that are mixed media. It's very difficult to have to find money, to find the financial support to sustain this new media, this mixed media. And Asian Isaita talks about an experience that is Yalla Italia, the one represented by Yalla Italia, that is quite, interesting, because it starts as a sort of, volunteers kind of activity, but then it becomes more professional. But then, of course, it's got the problems, the major problems that normal media, the mainstream media, can have. So money, organization, and again, representation. So again, another open question to you and to me. And just to finish, to end up with another couple of questions, if I may, if I can still have a couple of minutes. So, as to sum up, quantity of data. We have a lot of data now, but we need to analyze those data in a very consistent way. So through softwares, to in order to update the outcomes, the findings, not every year, but every time we need to say something about it. Not just isolated items, words, expressions, but also items, words, expressions in context. So let's look at clusters, co-collocations, so the semantic, the whole semantics of these expressions and terms. Otherwise, looking at these terms in isolation, like let's see if migrante has got a positive or negative connotation. How could you say that if you don't look at the context in such detail through these softwares, through this kind of analysis? Then, not just the verbal representation, but also the visual representation, not just through cinema, but in the media. So one important element in Italy, for instance, are not just the mainstream newspapers or the mainstream programs, news programs, but also the so-called programmi di intrattenimento. We have an example. I just put that because I got an email yesterday from Anna Meli, by the way, that contributed to the chapter to this, and I'm going to the chapter now. Anna Meli told me, look, even if some newspapers now, like La Repubblica, il Corriere della Sera, are much more careful when they talk about these problems, then we have what? Rete 4 and a program like Dalla Vostra Parte that talks about Roma people, gypsies, in a very derogative way. So what shall we do? I mean, our analysis should be applied also to these kinds of programs, to all the media system, not just to the mainstream ones, not just to the major articles that talks about this problem, but I programmi di intrattenimento or entertaining media are as much important and relevant as the other ones, as the news media. Anna Meli said, why I left a chapter as the last one, because Anna Meli works for Carta di Roma. Carta di Roma is an NGO that is monitoring, as I said, what newspapers do in terms of representation of migrants. If they give a sort of biased information, Carta di Roma, calls the director of the media of the newspaper, saying, "Look, what are you doing? Wait a minute, We have a law, the Mancino law against racism in Italy. We have a legal system. If you persist on doing this, we're gonna take you to court." So Carta di Roma is a very important institution, as NGO working on this. And Anna Meli is talking about the activities of the Carta di Roma in Italy in order to sort of create a new sort of awareness among journalists and editors in the media. But again, we have another problem here, because if you work with the Corriere della Sera and La Repubblica, they have journalists that are updated, well paid, with normal job contracts. But if you work with local papers, this is much more difficult. With local papers means that you have to work with people that don't have a contract. Sometimes they write, an article. In Italy, I would say a cottimo, So the more you write, the more you get paid, in terms of words. So they don't really care about the style, about the form, about the words they use, and nobody's checking that. So this is a major issue again. If you talk to La Repubblica or Corriere della Sera, it's easy to some extent. But if you talk to local papers, it's much more difficult, because you don't have not even the people to talk to. They don't understand the issue. They don't understand the problem. They're not aware of the problem. So again, Carta Idioma is trying to sort of create, organize workshops for all these journalists in order to make them more aware of these problems. And just to conclude, so as I said, visual representation, national mainstream newspapers and magazines and media, but also local ones, TV, entertaining, programs, and news, of course, but also multicultural media or mixed media. And again, we got another problem there, because the point is not just, all right, let's try to involve, migrants, in our sort of media system. Let's ask them to voice themselves, to write something, to be part of a board, to discuss these topics. But again, we need money. I mean, they need money. Multicultural or mixed media means money. If they don't have sponsorship, if they don't have the financial support to keep on working on this, also because they need to get some money for the job, right? If we want them to be professionals as much as the professionals we have in the Corriere della Sera, La Repubblica, even in a local paper. So this is another important issue. It's not just a representation. Now we need to empower people to get to that kind of professional level that would help us to understand this issue in a better way, and also would help us to establish a new network, which is not among us, white, middle-aged, middle-class, people, but is among all sort of people that want to work on these issues, right? And this is much more difficult, and especially in Italy, when you still have a biased information right now. So first, deconstruct the bad information or the non-neutral information, the derogatory information, from those points of view. So lexical items, discourse analysis, rhetorics, visual representation, semiotics, and blah blah. Then reconstruct a new network, a new system, a new media system by empowering other people with new contracts, with new sort of financial support, not just the political and social support, but also financial support. And then let's involve these new professionals in a new open discussion. In a few years' time, this book should have contributions by non-Italian people, mainly. And if we achieve that, I think we'd be successful. Thank you.